Thank you so much, Timon, for saying yes to discovering resilience with me here. And when we talked, I believe last week was the last week when we just randomly touched on resilience, and you seem really passionate about it.
Yeah.
And, and I was like, wow, I'm actually having interview series here, and I invited you, and you said yes. I'm excited because you have with a unique also background. I've had somebody Italian slash American. I had Mexican slash American, and you also have some slashes.
Oh,
I,
not nationality related, but yeah, I do move around a little bit. Yeah.
yes. So I feel I'm really curious and excited to hear your perspective and discover it with you. And I'll give the word to you to actually introduce yourself because I know you're wearing multiple hats and have multiple slashes. So I'll leave it up to you too, so I don't mess
All
it
right.
up.
Yeah. So my name's Timon Vinke. I'm Dutch and traveled the world around. Lived in India for a couple of years and currently live in Spain for the last 4 years. Married, have 2 kids, and I currently have 2 joint ventures. So basically 2 businesses that help coaches or other expert entrepreneurs to substantially grow their business. So that's basically a little bit of where I am right now. And yeah, the topic of resilience is really important for me. And I made some significant life choices because of that topic. And I'm happy to to talk more about that today. And yeah, what you can talk about.
Awesome. Well, thank you for introducing yourself and giving a little bit of background. I actually didn't know you lived in India. Huh.
Okay. Yeah.
Nice. So, the first question, what does resilience mean to you? How would you describe resilience?
So I had my own idea because, but you know me a little bit. I'm a little bit of a perfectionist, so I actually looked it up online in the dictionary. What's the definition of resilience? And and it really helped me to frame it a little bit. So there are 2 different definitions. The first one is the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties or toughness. And the second is the ability of a substance or object to spring back into shape. So that's more like physics related. But I think many people are when they're talking about the personal life is the first one, and I think that's also that's most important to me is the ability to deal with shock, to be able to handle setbacks, and to come back from those. And of course, those setbacks can happen in all areas of life. It can be emotionally, it can be a relationship, it can be financially, business, work related. So it doesn't. It can apply to all different areas of life. But I think, yeah. So I think that's the kind of in a nutshell what resilience is for me: the ability for me to absorb these shocks and then to come back from it, and maybe even stronger than you used to be. So you actually learn from the setbacks, become stronger through it, and then keep on going your life in the direction you want to take your life.
I love that. It gave me the idea of almost absorbing the shock and becoming stronger. It gave me the image of like working out in a gym. So you're improving your resiliency muscles in a way. I don't know. Would you have a story to share where we could see what helps you in being more resilient, or what helps you to absorb the shocks and grow through it?
Yeah, I think for me, the biggest thing is a sense of belief in your own abilities. So I think when you start out, a lot of the things, all the setbacks that can happen, even when they're about materialistic things, in the end, I think they all come back to your ability emotionally and mentally to deal with them. And so the stronger your own personality is, the stronger you are in that ability to handle those situations emotionally and to keep yourself focused. The better, the more resilient you are in that area. Because I think many, if not all, setbacks in life can be dealt with, and you can become stronger of it. But it's how you handle those situations that's really going to determine the outcome of those things. So I think. So I'm just trying to think of a good example from my own life that illustrates that point. And so it's not necessarily a setback, but the thing that comes to mind is that at a certain point in my career, I joined a company to work for them, and I actually said when I was interviewing for the position in that company, I said, I am switching company, and so I want to join your company because I want to grow into a managerial position. And at the time, the HR manager basically said, "Well, that's very how did you put it? Yeah, it was a really Dutch word, but that's really ambitious of you, or not, but in a negative sense. It's like." Ooh. It's almost like, who do you think you are? That
Oh no!
I'm like, is this still the company I want to work for? But then, but it also made me really determined. So, okay, well, I'll just show. It was in a very technical area, and with technical companies, you typically do have to prove your worth as a technical person before you get into a managerial position. So, okay, I said, okay, let's take a couple of years and do that. So after 3 years, I made some internal switches, but after 3 years work for the company, I got to a point where I said, okay, it basically was a crossroads. It's like, either I'm gonna get a managerial position for like within a few months, within the company, or I'm just gonna quit and I'm gonna start my own business. I didn't know what kind of business it would be or whatever. I just said, okay, I need to make that split, because the way it was going at that time, the progression just wasn't fast enough in my humble experience at the time. So I even communicated that to my managers and leadership. Said, hey, this is where I'm at. This is really what I want to do. And so what can. So 2 months later, I was general manager of the Indian office, and that's how we moved to India.
Oh, nice.
So I think, so what is it that has to do with resilience? I think I was willing to absorb any consequences from having that conversation, because I knew that whichever way it would turn out, it would turn out for the best in the long run. So maybe I did have to quit. Maybe the manager would have said, well, if that's how you look at it, well, then you can go find and work somewhere else. Or I don't know, they're always different. I mean, those are a lot of times the stories that we tell ourselves why we don't have those kind of conversations with our managers or our superiors, or even with our clients if you're in the business, because you're afraid that they might respond negatively. But if you truly believe in yourself and your ability to handle negative outcomes, then that fear of having that conversation and the fear of having those kind of conversations just kind of disappear. Well, it doesn't disappear, but it just makes it easier to move forward despite the fear. I think that's a better description.
I love it. So kind of your tool in your resiliency toolbox would be believe in yourself and your abilities. That
basically your believe in yourself, your own ability to handle the situation and either mitigate the outcome of it, or even turn it into something good.
And it sounds like you also had some other options or already like a strategy. Okay, if this is what I want, so you have a clarity about what you want. And kind of non-negotiable standard. Sounds like this is what I want, and if I cannot get it here, then I'm going somewhere else and I'm going to start my own. But this is what I want, and really going after what you want and believing that you can get it. What would you say, if we look at what helps you believe in yourself?
Yeah, that's a good one. I think it has a lot to do with introspection. I don't know if that's correct English. I'm just trying to translate it from Dutch, but basically looking at your own inner self.
Yeah.
And truly be honest with yourself about what it is that you value and what it is that you find important. And try to live your life accordingly as much as possible. I think another big part of that is and it reminds me of the program that you put me in. It's taking smaller steps initially to build up that. So if you are in a position right now where you feel, well, I can't have that confrontation, or I'm not, no, let's put it, if you're not yet confident that you can handle the situations or you can resolve situations, I would try to look for smaller things that you can do. So, and the reason I'm bringing it up is I think a part of resilience is having backups or basically mitigating the worst outcome. So if you ask yourself about any kind of situation, like what's the worst that can happen, like realistically, what's the worst that can happen coming from this situation? And if you find that worst outcome is an completely unacceptable outcome to you, then what is it? What are the actions or what are the steps that you can take to reduce the worst outcome or remove the worst outcome, or to bring it back to a level where you do find it an acceptable worst case scenario?
What I'm hearing, it sounds like, there are some reactions that sometimes we have a shock and then we instinctively react to something. But sounds like in your resilience, there's like this pausing and reflecting, introspecting, and also considering going into the future, like if the worst thing happens, like can I tolerate it? How could I prepare for it?
Yeah.
And like make some planning. So it's more, there's some thoughtfulness in it, sounds like, instead of like, okay, I'm resilient, this is what I'm gonna do, like acting instinctively or reacting to something. You see a situation, okay, this is something I don't like, let me pause and see what's happening here. What are my options? I love it. So kind of have a backup plan ahead, look at the worst case scenario.
Yeah.
That
kind of brings me into the, for me, that this is like an overarching direction that the world is going in. And I think that was how we got to talk about this topic at all. But it's like there's like an overarching trajectory that the world is going in. And I feel that every person in the world needs to be aware of that's where we are as human, as a species, that this is the direction where we're going in. Because and basically what I'm trying to, it's talking about overpopulation, it's talking about the amount of energy that we are consuming, not even, and then in long term and mid or long term, it's like the climate change that's happening and the effects that's going to happen. But even in the short run, I mean, it's like we're living in such a complex system, and it's completely optimized for efficiency. But because it's very efficient, it's all everything, like all the parts are being delivered final minute. It's like the entire supply chain is built around let's make everything last minute because it's cheaper, because there is no inventory. But then there is also like zero resilience in that system, because as soon as one, you see now, the first thing that you really notice it from the larger public started to notice is that cars were not being produced because they were missing microchips. It's like that this tiny part of the car is missing, and that's stopping the entire, because they didn't have any inventory, because the supply chain was hit. You now see it starting happening with energy. because in Europe the gas prices have doubled or even quadrupled. The coal prices have quadrupled. In China, they're now having deliberate power outages. So now after COVID, there are factories that in China that now have to shut down again because they don't have enough power to supply all the factories with power.
And therefore additional crisis.
And therefore an additional. So, and it is nice, and because the system is so complex, it's impossible to predict where it will lead to. I'll give you an example. My wife used to buy these bottles for our kids, and it's from a special brand. And she just want to buy another one. She went to the website and said, well, we can't deliver the bottles anymore because we don't have a small rubber piece that goes in the bottle. We can't get it anymore.
Wow.
So it's like it's starting to show up in more and more places in life. So, and I think, so we talk a lot so far about emotional resilience, but this is more about the practical things. So it's more like, so that is also one of the reasons why we decided to move to this island. At least for me, for my wife, it was less of an issue, but for me it was, and that's food security, drink. Because if you look, basically, I'm looking at the pyramid of Maslow. If you're not, you can look it up. It's basically the hierarchy of needs. So first it's food, shelter, and water. Well, not in that order. It's actually water, food, and then shelter. Then in that kind of importance. So when you're talking about resilience in that area, is that it's actually funny. This is the first thing that I kind of publicly talk about it. I've been working on it myself for a long time, but it's really interesting. The emotion that I now feel talking about it more publicly is like while I know that there are a lot of people that are in a similar situation, but it still feels like uncomfortable to talk about because it's so far away from the general narrative that is in our society, basically. Right? Because it's not the official story. It's not. And I know that in the US they have this whole prepper movement as well. That's like, that also has like a negative connotation to that, or a little bit like a crazy person connotation to it.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily that, but I think one of the first things that really triggered me around that. So the progress I made into that area is going from financial resilience. So that's basically talking about financial freedom and creating passive income. That brought me onto the trajectory to talk about all the other stuff. Because as you start learning about money, then you realize that money is basically worthless because it's just an invention of human beings. It's not even true wealth. So when you start thinking about, okay, how can I build wealth? Then you go into what's underlying the economy, what's below all of that. So anyway, that's a whole rabbit hole that you can get into. But in generally speaking, when we talked about worst case outcome, right? So and that's where those two things come together. Because if you are able to create food and water and shelter, security for yourself, then what's truly the worst that can happen? In any business deal, in any conversation, what's the worst that can happen? You can lose your job, but you still have your food, your water, and your shelter and your house. So the worst outcome by that is all. I sometimes say to friends, it's like, if you have those three things, all the rest is extra. All the rest is bonus. All the rest is, well, it's not luxury necessarily, but it's like you don't necessarily need it. It's great to have it. And I'm grateful for it, but it's not. So what's the worst outcome if you have those three things secure? It's like, okay, I can lose some luxuries. Maybe I need to start homeschooling my kids instead of sending them to a private school. That's like a practical outcome of that. But in the long run, it's like, so what? It's like I could do that. If it really comes to that, I could do that. So I think that has, for me, has a lot to do with creating your own resilience and Yeah. I think it has, for me, it's like creating that foundation of that really secures the things that you really need, not the ones that you think you need, but that you actually really physically need.
I love
And
it.
once that foundation is in place, then you can build everything beautiful on top of that, and you can experiment and do crazy stuff. But because if it comes tumbling down, it doesn't matter. You still have that foundation, and you can start rebuilding again.
Hmm. It triggered a thought in me. It's like, first of all, thank you for sharing this perspective. Especially thank you, knowing as you shared that it's kind of uncomfortable to share. And I feel one of your strengths is really being able to pause and also not just introspect, but also see and predict where is it coming, like to have the vision of possible futures. And I feel that that is your strength, and that's why you see the possible scenarios, and you can see, okay,
Yeah.
this is that. And I love also your perspective of not just personal resiliency, but resiliency of your family, because based on previous conversation, you do that to provide for your family, to keep them safe, to have food and water for your family. So it's like making the resilience theme even bigger than individual. And you've also mentioned society, how our society can become resilient and how all the pieces are interconnected.
Yeah.
And how the system suddenly, when COVID happened and everything kind of got messed up, how suddenly things are not working anymore the way they used to work.
Yeah.
So the better we prepare, and you already see where it could go if something doesn't get fixed.
Yeah. And another way that I look at when you talk about that kind of physical is it's like sometimes if I do talk with people about it, it's like, yeah, but I don't think that's gonna happen. I'm not sure that that's gonna happen. I'm not sure that that's the trajectory. Although but it's like odds. It's like the chances of it happening. I see it actually increasing almost daily, definitely on a weekly basis. That we're still going into that direction. So it's also insurance. It's like it's taking fire insurance on your house. You hope you don't need it, because if it, and this is just realistically speaking, I know that a lot of people don't have that physical resilience in their lives. So if that situation would come to pass, there are literally millions, maybe probably even billions of people that are really going to suffer through that period. So I really hope that we don't get there. I'm not, and it's not, and I don't see it as a certainty that it's going to happen at the moment. But I do see it as a serious enough possibility that we're going there, that I do want to make sure that I prepare as best as I can.
Yeah, you see the signs, and it's one of the possible futures, not desired future, but it's possible, and it's better to be prepared. Just like here in California, we better have an earthquake kit, a flashlight, at least some solar charging panel or something. So when the power is out, then we can still function somehow and reach for help. And I love the way of like insurance, looking it's also sometimes when we are not prepared, and when things happen, then it's too late to fix it, and then we are in trouble, and it's ways. So actually you are bringing us a huge gift by saying, through your perspective and your strength, saying, hey people, pause and ask, what is the truly important things you need to put in place now, so if anything happens later, you at least have something to fall back on.
Yeah exactly. And I know that especially in California, because I do follow a lot about what's happening in the US in a macro trend kind of way, because it's still the biggest Western Europe economy. So basically what happens economically in the US is going to impact not only the rest of the Western world, but the entire world. So when you talk about California, for example, it's really basically there is an entire society that's being built in the desert. Especially maybe if some of the coastal areas is a different story, but generally speaking. So one of the things that I would really worry myself about if I would be living there is the water.
Yeah.
It's not even the food or the other. It's where do I get the water from for during the drought period?
Yes.
So that's something very practical. That's like it's because I know that they're drilling into the aquifers there, the water there to do, for example, the almond production.
Yes. Yeah.
And they're using huge amounts of water that have been in the soil for literally tens of thousands of years, and they're depleting that water. And I think nobody really knows how much water is still left, but it's like, and I think that's as you know, I'm a technical person from training, and I do look at it a lot of these things I really look at it analytically and from a numbers, and it's like it's mathematically impossible that it's going to continue indefinitely. So the only question is, when is it going to stop? But it's sure that, so in this particular example, the water for the almond growth, almond trees in the California, it is going to stop at some point, because at some point the aquifers are going to be empty and there is not enough rainfall during the year to support it. So it's going to stop. The only question is when. And that's, I think, and that's where, if you think that when is going to be like 300 years from now, then basically you then don't have anything to worry about. If you believe that, like I do, if you believe that is actually going to happen within our lifetimes, or maybe even the next 10 to 20 years, then maybe that's something that you need to consider and think about.
You know, I'm so grateful that you said yes, because you're bringing totally different perspective, and I love it. And it's I feel it's very valuable to, that's why the Project Elephant, exploring from different perspectives. And I feel that's very important conversation also to have, because a lot of us, and I feel it's even in our, like, as you said, like you mentioned emotions and how we work inside, like part of as humans, yes, we can plan, but sometimes it's so difficult just to see the future consequences. And I think your strength is in actually looking for them and what can happen in the future. It reminded me of, let's say on personal level, if we don't exercise, if we eat junk food daily, well, we are not going to feel the consequences tomorrow, but in 10 years, it might be too late we will have already the issues that will not be easily correctable. And I see you're looking at it not from the like one lifetime perspective, but from like the future generations. And maybe that's the struggle that a lot of people don't want to see, because they're just looking at, okay, let's look at our lifetime. But what if, let's say, the water runs out in the generation of our children, and we are screwing them up by, just like in the exercise and eating, if we are not eating now, well, then in 10 years, it might be too late. So what if we are doing something now that we are basically screwing up lives of our children and next generations? And so it takes, I guess, also a heart to care about the future generations, and not to care just about, okay, me. It's not gonna be affecting me in my lifetime. I don't care.
No, and I think, but I think that's like the general. Again, this is a little bit challenging for a lot of people, maybe, because what I was going to say right away, and I'm still going to say it, is like a lot of people, when you ask them that question, do you care about the future of your children or your grandchildren? Of course, they're going to say yes.
Yeah.
But if you look at the actions that they are taking in their day-to-day life, that those actions don't necessarily line up with what they believe in. And I think the major reason is because they never really consider the consequences, the really long-term consequences of that action. So it is not that they don't. I think it's not that they're being bad, because they do deliberately take that action that's going to deliver a certain or might deliver a certain outcome in the future. It's just that they never thought it through to that extent. Like, okay, this one thing I'm doing right now, how is that going to affect the next generation, or it's
Yeah. And thank you for saying that anyway. That's why we have these conversations to see different perspectives. And being curious instead of one of my intentions for this was to be curious about each other's experiences and what is there, what is the bigger picture here, what is the truth that we can all agree on. So thank you for sharing that. And I love how, in a way, you expand the resiliency on future generations, taking care not just of your family, but also how can I provide the support or better conditions for the generations to come. And seeing the trends globally in a way. Now, what else is happening? And I see that what is the worst case scenario, your kind of resiliency tool is also looking at, okay, this is in this situation, let's say with the work, but also globally in life of my family, what is the worst case scenario and how can I prepare for that?
Yeah. Right.
Oh, I love it. So it looks like when we come now sum it up, what resiliency based on all that we've shared.
And so I think it comes down to because I now shared what basically my outlook of the future. So basically, what I would say is that think if you really want to build up your resilience, and then you basically need to decide on what is the outcome that you're building towards. What outcome are you building your resilience? So whether you agree with me or whether you have a different view on that doesn't necessarily matter. But so I think for all people, it starts, and that's how, like I mentioned, that's how I started. It starts with being financially resilient. Yeah. So that means not having debt, not having, or at least not non-productive debt, having, if possible, multiple income levels, or some kind of backup plan that if your income level and you have financial buffers, maybe have some savings, some investments. But yeah, I think that's really where a lot of people would need to start, and it's also relatively easy to start with. So from my point of view, stop spending on all those luxurious stuff and really think about how to invest. So we in a family we have a and I don't know where I learned it from, but we have a kind of a saying that's called we cry once. Oh. So what we mean by that is when we purchase something, we typically go for higher quality, which is very dear, which costs more. So we cry over the expense of that. Oh my God, this is so expensive. But in the long run, we only cry once when we make the purchase. But if you buy a bad product or bad service or whatever it might be, then you have every time that you use it or every time that it breaks down again, then you cry again and again and again. So you keep yourself. So instead of buying that next blanchy thing or whatever, for me, and this is very, very personal, but for me, it's like, it's completely ridiculous that you buy an iPhone for $800. Yeah. If you can buy a phone that has the same functionality that you can buy for maybe even $100 or $150. So it's that kind of trade-off. It's like, okay, really think about it. What do I really need it or do I want it? And of course, if you do have the income, then that's great, and go for it. But if you feel that if you don't have that financial resilience, then those kind of purchases really don't make any sense to me. But that's very personal. But yeah, it's.
You're actually bringing up a point that I already wanted to address before, and I forgot about it. And now you reminded me of. I wonder if there's additional level of resilience, in that is resilience of the. I'm wondering how to word it, like of the marketing messages that tell people you have to buy, let's say, this phone because it's the best thing ever. And once you buy that, you are going to become this, whatever, respected person or loved person. and this is going to provide, just spend all the money, even when you don't have it, put it on credit card, because then you're going to feel so great.
Yeah.
So how would we call this resilience, or against? What would be, so being resilient in a way?
I think I'll just I think it has to do with true happiness, and I think so. Some people, at least I've been told, I've never been told that in my face, but some people might see our life the way that we are creating it right now as a reduced amount of luxury, because we're not buying those fancy stuff, because we're putting that into something else.
Yeah.
But if I now have these chickens, and if I have my 1.5-year-old, I actually feel it. If I see my 1.5-year-old, who's just able to say his first words, and he's like completely enthralled with the chickens, and he loves to go and feed them, and he goes like, "Daddy, I want to go." He's pulling me towards the chickens because he wants to go visit them. It's like that. Those are the moments that bring me really happiness. And first of all, it didn't cost me $800. Number two, it's a form of happiness I can experience day after day after day, because the chickens are there, and the kid is hopefully going to be here for a very long time. Yeah. So I think it has. So for me, it's creating. It's trying to really find what are the true things in your life that really makes you happy, and not a quick adrenaline rush of the purchase, or look at my new great gadget, but what are really things that you can enjoy day after day and multiple times, and look at those things.
I love it. It reminded me also of the other tool that you've mentioned, the introspection, and some people, and that sometimes it's maybe that's the tool that could prevent from, falling for all the other marketing strategies of the companies that just want to sell the luxury items. And it is happening. I used to be in retail when I had like a mini store long time ago. And it was interesting enough, the best-selling place was in, let's say, financially challenged neighborhood. And we were selling makeup. And those women said, "I don't have the money now, but please put it aside so I can come back. I want this." Yeah. They even didn't have the money, yet they wanted a high-priced product. And I actually couldn't. That's why I no longer am in that business, because it just didn't feel right. But that is my personal story. But what I'm trying to get to is clarity about your values, what really makes you happy. And sometimes it takes time and actually having to pause and reflect.
Yeah. And that reminds you, I don't know if you have the time, but in that sense, I'm really blessed that I've traveled so much, because I've been in countries where it's like real poverty, like that nobody in the Western world can if they haven't traveled, can really imagine. But the one story that really stood out. So when we were living in India, we were living on the 6th floor of a building. And in India, we were living in Mumbai. Every year there is a heavy monsoon there, monsoon rains. And so every year the streets would get flooded. The sewer system just couldn't handle it. So the first time that we were living there, that it happened, it's like, we were like, oh my God, this is like, what is happening? Of course, our house was safe. We were on the 6th floor. The water didn't get that high, but it was about knee high. And so we went outside. It's just to experience that. And I was taking pictures and because it's just such an incredible sight for us. So then a couple of Indian peoples were local people were looking at us, saying, "So making pictures." And I'm like, I hope they don't mind that I was taking the picture of, in a certain sense, of their misery, because it was their shops at local level and their homes at local level that were flooded. And at a certain point, there were people coming up to me and saying, Oh, you're making pictures of the, yeah, I'm making pictures. Here, come look in my house, how bad it is in my house. It's in my house, it's almost flooded for a meter. Here, this shop is only 30 centimeters. So they didn't mind at all. And they were almost like people were just scooping their shops empty of the water, trying to get the water out again. And they're trying all these things to do. But there was still this atmosphere of resilience in that sense, emotionally, like, yeah, we have a temporary setback. Yeah, my house is flooded, but 1 week from now the water will be gone. And it's like, and I'm like, imagine that happening. At least if you imagine that happening in the Western world, it's like everybody would be at the top of their mind, like, oh my God, my house is flooded. Yeah, well, in some
Constant
places,
TV coverage.
yeah, in some countries it happens every year. So it's
Yes.
and I think that in so. And so I just was reminded about that story, because that really shows how you can, based on your emotional state, you can completely respond differently to the same situation.
Thank you. What a beautiful conclusion to put 2 points, because we got to the story of being, in a way, looking at different cultures, different environments, different conditions that people live in. And that regardless of the conditions, that they can become resilient. So it's not even about the conditions as much, but about like really going back to the inner state. And I would say you are adding to our picture of like being clear about what's really important. What is the end goal? Like, this is the bit on the safety level: food, water, and safety, shelter. And so this is physical. On a physical level, what's really important here? And on the emotional level, what is really important here? What really makes me happy? Is it the luxury item, or is it the time with my son and the chicken?
Yeah.
And the pressure movement. And you have the clarity to go for what really matters. Anyway, anybody would like to connect with you? What is the best way to connect with you?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, I had different hats. So I think the best way is just to connect with me on LinkedIn. I check that out every day. So that's LinkedIn, and then Timon Mark Vinke.
Yes. Yeah, I'll put it in the comments underneath under the video. Perfect. Thank you.
So yeah, people can just, if they want to talk about this or about business or whatever, I'm happy to connect and have a chat with the people.